Okay guys, so this is just nonsense. I have several doors because I collect them. Don't judge me. I like old doors. So this one was an old pantry. This one was an old like Victorian home door. And this one was from Chicago. The owners actually brought it with them from one of their really old houses there. It's like the cool plate still on it. Anyways, we're gonna talk more about this later, but I'm messing with what I want to use as a table on it. I've got additional, like you guys, I've got salvage problems. But I mean, it's for a reason. So this is what I've come up with for this one. I got this idea from something that I found when I was doing my mom's room makeover. It was like a weird table door situation that she now has in her bedroom as like a little door table. I don't know what it's called. It's a door table, okay? So anyways, this is what we're gonna make. And it's just, I've got some legs here. This is a perfect fit. The measurements matched. It came from an old desk that was just destroyed. So you can see some damage on the top. And these things busted out of it. So the piece that it was attached to is ruined. They can't be used anymore. So we're upcycling. We're saving things. We're helping the planet right now. So yeah, this is kind of what's gonna happen. We're gonna try and put this together. So let's get to it.
All right, these legs are a bit swoopy, a little French action going on with them. So I'm kind of lining them up to something that's pleasing to my eye, and then I'm taking my measuring tape to make sure that they are both equidistant from the back and the sides and all that. So then I'm taking a marker and tracing the outline of them because I'm going to be taking them off. I don't want to measure every single time. So this is just an easy way for me to set them back on there and note that they're in the right spot. Now I'm going to be attaching these with glue and a Kreg jig. These Kreg jigs are awesome. I just have the individual one. It gets me by. I don't do a ton of projects where I need to use it, but when I do need to use it, it is so great to have. So if you don't already have one of these, I highly recommend them. I think they're incredible. So like I said, attaching this with pocket holes and glue. So it's going to be a very sturdy, secure leg. I'm not going to be worried about anything because you guys know if you're putting your name on something, you want to make sure that it's structurally sound. You're giving it to the person knowing that it's not going to fall apart in 5 minutes. So I want this table to be used. I don't want it to just be, I mean, it's decorative and it's fun, but I want it to be something that is sturdy and good. So I'm putting pocket holes on, I believe I did 6. So 2 on the larger sides and then 1 on each of the smaller sides. And that felt really secure. So I was happy with that, and I felt like the leg was still really secure in itself, like it didn't take away too much wood or break it down in any way. So I think that was a good choice. But for whatever legs you're using, you kind of just have to figure it out as you go. If you're using flat legs, there's probably a way to screw it up from the bottom into the underneath side of the table. You kind of just got to figure it out. These ones, as you could see, had 1 hole there, and then they would have had brackets on the underneath side of a table. I'm putting it on something else, so I had to attach it my own way. So I'm making sure that my underneath side of the table is very clean because you want a strong adhesion with the glue because the top of the leg isn't cross grain, it's end grain, and end grain does not adhere as well as cross grain. That's a fun fact if you didn't already know. So I just want to make sure everything's super clean. It's going to have the screws. It's going to be very secure. I just want to make sure I'm giving it as good of a chance as I can. So now I'm just putting all those screws in, and like I said, this thing was so secure. I felt really good about it. And I've never built one of these before, and the one that I had found for my mom, it was not built well. But I still thought it was cool, and I was like, I could do this better. So that's what we're doing it better. And hopefully the next time I do one of these, I will build that one even better than this one. Let's just onwards and upwards, folks. So these are just the leftover hinges on the door. They were really in there, so I had to kind of hammer it out once I got the nails or the screws out, but they came out clean. I have no use for those hinges because I don't have the other side of them, but That's fine. So I am keeping this side of the plate on the door because they had one on either side. So I took the back one off because it's unnecessary and it's probably going to be going against somebody's wall and you don't want any part of the door to scratch their wall. So that just got removed. I'm using my Chalk Mountain cleaner all over this entire piece. And once I had gone over the whole thing with that, I realized that it was not enough for the decades of grime that was built up on the side of this door. So I went in with my liquid sandpaper. You guys know that I love this stuff. And even that wasn't enough. So on top of the liquid sandpaper, I am also going to be using a scraper. And I just went at it with this poor door. I mean, it had years and years of buildup on it. It was really icky. But once you kind of, this is gonna sound gross, once you kind of break off the top layer of grime, the other cleaners can kind of get in there and break it up a little bit easier. It kind of gets a hard shell. Oh, this is just grossing me out, just saying it out loud. I'm very sorry. But if you need to know what to do, scrape it off and then your other stuff can get in there. And then it's ready for paint. Hooray. So this first coat that I'm doing is my favorite cream color that I mix up from Chalk Mountain. It's Mellow White and a smidge of Woodland Harbor, just till I get the shade that I like. And I find that I use this color like all the time, all the time. I mix it up so frequently. So I'm just doing my base coat on everything. It's not a clean look. This whole piece is going to be distressed. It's going to be very farmhouse, cottagey, all that. So I'm not worried about a perfect paint job. I'm just slapping paint on. And that's kind of what's fun about these is they aren't supposed to be perfect. It's supposed to be, you know, it's an upcycled project. It's supposed to be something that is just supposed to look old. It's from reclaimed items. I just think that's so cool and easy. This whole project took me like maybe 8 hours total. And that's obviously with breaks and dry time and all that. So, I mean, just very, very easy, very, very fast. So as you can see, I'm painting this while it's still separate. That is just gonna save you because it's so much easier to paint things when they're off and you can move them around and see underneath to make sure you're getting all the angles. Had I attached this first and then painted it, I can guarantee you I would have missed some spots and I would have seen them later on and been really upset at myself for not double checking everything. So this is just, it's the way to go. If you can paint things before they're put together, do it. And now we're starting in on the second coat. So the first coat was actually a really, really thin layer because I wanted to see kind of what it was going to do, what it was going to look like. And I just kind of like starting out with a thinner coat on something like this where I know I'm going to end up distressing it because I'm like, why am I going to waste a bunch of paint if I don't have to? So it gave me a nice thin coat to get on there. And then the second coat is going on so perfectly and I'm going to take it off. So it's just a little bit sad, but it's lovely. And then we're going to even add a little bit more to it with some light khaki. That's going to come in a little bit later just to add a little bit of age because this is an old door, but typically if you're doing something old and you're trying to give it an old look, it would have had many layers of paint on it. So, okay, this Durham's putty is incredible. If you have not already tried it, you definitely should. It dries so hard, just so hard, which is really cool. That's what I'm using to fill these giant holes in this piece, and it dries super fast. I did let it dry overnight, but I didn't do this in layers. You know how typically if you have something that's larger, you'll fill it with a wood filler, like a smaller layer, and then you'll kind of keep adding to it until it dries. I didn't have to with this. I could just fill up the entire thing and it was fine the next day. So that was really cool. Now I'm sanding it smooth, as you do. And like I said, this stuff is really hard, so I was finding that my sanding sponge was a little bit too soft, so I wrapped some sandpaper around a piece of wood to give me something that's just a little bit sturdier to kind of wear it down. and we're gonna attach this thing. This will also be screws and glue. This won't be pocket hole screws because that's not the way this attaches, but screws and glue, making sure it's sturdy. I'm just using a flat board to kind of get it. This is just the eyeball section right here, kind of figuring out where it's gonna go and how I want it to kind of be on there for now. And then I'll finalize everything before I actually attach it. So I'm very gently leaning that back to kind of get the general idea. It's still gonna have to be nudged because as soon as you put glue on something, it's gonna slip and slide, and that's to be expected. So I'm gonna get that board back down on there, and then I've got some other boards that I'm using. You guys use a level, use whatever you want. I know these boards are 90 degrees, so I wasn't worried about it. But if you want to use a square, if you want, I mean, anything that you have to make sure that you're making sure this is right and level, do that. And then it's either just little tiny corrections, tapping it one way or the other, depending on where I need it. And then again, I'm double checking because once this is on here, it's gonna be on here. That's not true. You probably have a couple minutes to, if you totally messed up, to take it off and redo it, but you know, it's just best not to take it off and redo it. Let's do it right the first time, folks. But so I'm using this same drill bit as I was for my pocket hole screws, because guess what? It actually creates a tiny little divot in there so that it will hide your screw head. So if you don't already have a countersink bit, this drill bit works for that. So I'm only doing the screws and the glue, as you can see, on the right and left sides, because the center, it's not touching anything. There is a frame in the wood, so it's don't waste glue and screws in that center section. I was a little sad the table didn't come up as high. I didn't have legs tall enough for that, so that was a little upsetting, but we're doing what we can with what we have. So I'm putting this plate back on. I did give it a little dry brush with the same paint, just so that it was kind of matchy and not as stark on there. So this is what I mean with that little gap there. I couldn't look at it and be satisfied, so we're gonna do a little fix. It right now is not the best fix ever, but it's working and I'm living with it. So I'm taking my pull saw. This thing is also awesome, super inexpensive as well. Just get one of these if you don't already have one. If you don't want to pull out power tools all the time, I don't like to, and this saw actually works really, really quickly. So I know that I need to create some 45s on this board on 3 sides to fit it up under there and have it sit, we'll call it mostly flush with the door and that ridge there. So that's what I'm doing, cutting 45s out and around, and I just kind of marked it to measure in that spot. And most of it's going to be hidden underneath the back panel of the table. So if you're doing this on your own, like, just get legs that, you know, fit, or don't. I'm just doing this as I go. Yeah, so there you can see the angles there. It's just a piece of plywood. It still has the wave in it because, you know what? No one's gonna see that bottom part. All I did to this piece was glue it in. It was so snug in there. It was such a snug fit that I'm not worried about it escaping ever. So just with the glue, and then I'm actually gonna tap it in with another piece of wood to get it up in there, because obviously the hammer wouldn't reach up underneath the underside. So I'm just giving it tiny nudges, and I have to go from left to right, back and forth, until I get it all the way up in the right spot. And then I took a little bit of the Durham's putty and kind of filled around the edges, just a smidge, so it wasn't such a weird transition between the door and the wood. You can still see this. If that gap there didn't bother you, I mean, then don't worry about it, but for whatever reason, it really hurt my soul. I couldn't look at it without twitching, so that got put in. And now I'm just distressing, as you do, making it farmhousey, cottagey, old, really old. That's the goal here. So when I distress, I'm using a sanding block Oh, here I'm just kind of sanding down the filler there. And then we'll paint that. But when I'm distressing, I go around all the hard edges, anywhere that would have been touched more than others or rubbed against more than any other spots. I don't typically like to distress in weird places that wouldn't actually get wear. My cute tiny dustpan. And so this is the light khaki color. And this is, I never watered this one down. So this is a really thick paint, and you can see I've already distressed over the door there. We're gonna do this, and then I'm gonna distress over it again. So the previous color will also go through, and it'll just look like more layers of paint, which is super, super cool. Even though they're both like a cream color, they're different cream colors, and I think it just kind of adds a little something extra. Of course, you don't have to do any of this. You can paint it all white, one color, whatever you want to do. And then I just felt like it was very stark down the center. So what I did is I took my Iron Gate, which is my favorite gray, and I diluted it with the khaki so it wasn't a very strong contrast. And then we're just going to be taking this huge wall stencil, and I'm using the Chalk Mountain. It's an applicator sponge. This thing is awesome. I use it for nearly everything. They're very inexpensive and they do all the things. But yeah, so I'm just using it to stipple the stencil on, and then we're going to distress this back as well. So here's a fun trick. If you stencil up from the bottom, if you're working down, by the time you take this off and reattach it, that part will be dry. But for whatever reason, I was not thinking and stencil from the top down, so when I had to move it down, it was still wet. Don't do what I do. And then I just felt like the table needed something. So I wrapped the stencil down, and I actually brought the stencil down over the sides as well. And there's the distressing. I just feel like it doesn't matter how clean of a look I'm doing, I will always distress back a stencil because I just think that they look weird sitting on top of paint, like it was an afterthought. So when you do this, I feel like it lets it look lived in to where it's meant to be there. This is gold wax. It is not gilding wax, it is gold sealing wax. And it will release a kind of like goldenrodish color all over your paint. So that will stay in there. If you do not like a golden hued color on your paint, don't use the gold wax because that's what it does. Any of their colored waxes, Chalk Mountain has a ton of colored waxes. Whatever color you choose will hue the paint that color. So that's something to think about. This also does have teeny tiny sparkles in it, which brings me joy. So that's why I'm doing this, because I'm kind of doing the cream door and I want it to all have that. Oh, there's the babes. He had a little nap at the shop. He's so cute. Sorry, had to throw that in there. And then after this sits on for, I don't know, like 30-ish minutes, I went through and wiped it back. If you'd like to do an extra coat, you totally can. This I don't think is gonna need it at all because it's more of a decor piece. The table is super sealed. Their wax is incredible. One of my pieces has been through a flood and it was just sealed with wax and it came out perfect. There was nothing wrong with it and I was so shocked. So because this doesn't have the knob on the other side to hold it in place, I'm actually using E6000 to glue it in. Oh man, I was just gonna clamp this doorknob on and my clamps apparently were not deep enough to do the doorknob, which was very frustrating. So then I'm like, oh, it's fine, I'll just tape it because I tape everything. No, you can't tape after you waxed because you just can't. It was freshly waxed. You can't do it. After it's cured, it's fine, but not after it's freshly. It's just, so that was just dumb on my part. And then I found this long piece of wood and I could clamp it on the other side and held it just fine. So yeah, again, doing what we can. Okay, so the finished product is coming up. It was about $10 in like product from the legs and the door and everything like that. I'm going to list it at $200. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I just listed it just now, so we shall see. But hopefully it will be $200-ish that I can put towards buying the house. So that would be awesome. I hope you guys like, subscribe, and I'll see you next week.